Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I've been driving trucks for about 15 years now, and I've seen a lot of weird things on the road. You spend enough time out there in the dark, cruising through states where the radio barely picks up a signal, and you start to understand that the world is different at 3 in the morning. It's quieter, lonelier, and sometimes it's something else entirely. This happened to me about 3 years ago, somewhere in the stretch between Amarillo, Texas, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's one of those routes where you can drive for an hour without seeing another soul. Just empty highway, scrubland on both sides, and a sky so black it feels like it's pressing down on you. I'd left Amarillo around midnight. My load was headed to a distribution center in New Mexico, and I wanted to make good time. The weather was clear, the truck was running smooth, and I had a thermos full of coffee. Everything was perfect, or at least it should have been. About an hour into the drive, I saw someone standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was just a figure, barely visible in the glow of my headlights. But as I got closer, I could see it was a man. He was tall, maybe 6 feet or so, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His thumb was out, the universal sign for a hitchhiker. Now, I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. It's not that I'm paranoid, but you hear stories, people getting robbed or worse. But something about this guy made me feel bad for him. He looked stranded. There was no car around, no lights from a gas station or rest stop. Just him, standing there in the middle of nowhere. I slowed down. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I'd been alone for so long, or maybe it was because I couldn't shake the image of him standing out there all night, waiting for someone who might never come. Either way, I pulled over. He walked up to the passenger side and I rolled down the window. Up close, he looked normal enough. Maybe in his 30s, with short brown hair and a face that didn't stand out in any particular way. He smiled at me, and it was a friendly smile. Not too wide, not too eager, just polite. "Thanks for stopping," he said. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "I've been out here for hours." "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Albuquerque," he said. "I can pay you for gas if you want." I thought about it for a second. Albuquerque was exactly where I was going, so it wasn't like I'd be going out of my way, and he seemed harmless. So I unlocked the door and told him to get in. He climbed into the cab, and I pulled back onto the highway. For the first few minutes, we didn't say much. He sat there quietly, looking out the window at the dark landscape rolling by. I tried to make small talk, asked him what he was doing out there, but he just said his car had broken down and he'd been walking for a while. It wasn't until we'd been driving for about 20 minutes that I started to feel uneasy. It was nothing obvious at first, just a feeling. You know the kind. The one where the hairs on the back of your neck stand up and you can't quite put your finger on why. I glanced over at him and he was still staring out the window, but there was something off about the way he was sitting. He was too still, too rigid, like he was forcing himself not to move. "You doing okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer right away. For a moment I thought maybe he hadn't heard me, but then he turned his head slowly and looked at me. His eyes were different. I can't explain it, but they didn't look right. They were dark, almost black, and they didn't reflect the light from the dashboard the way they should have. "I'm fine," he said. His voice was the same as before, calm and even, but something about it made my skin crawl. I turned my attention back to the road, trying to shake off the feeling. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe the coffee wasn't doing its job. But the longer we drove, the worse the feeling got. After a while, I noticed something strange. In the side mirror, I could see the road behind us. It was empty, as usual, but every now and then I thought I saw something. A flicker of movement, like another vehicle was back there, just out of sight. But whenever I looked closer, there was nothing. "You see that?" I asked, nodding toward the mirror. He leaned forward slightly, looking at the mirror. Then he smiled again, that same polite smile. "See what?" "I thought I saw." "Never mind," I said. I was probably just imagining things. But then I saw it again. This time it was clearer. Headlights, maybe a quarter-mile back. They were dim, barely visible, but they were there, and they were keeping pace with us. "There's someone behind us," I said. He looked at the mirror again, then back at me. "I don't see anyone." I frowned. The lights were right there. How could he not see them? But I didn't push it. Instead, I kept driving, my eyes flicking between the road and the mirror. The lights stayed behind us for another 10 minutes. They didn't get closer, but they didn't fall back either. Just stayed there, hovering in the distance. It was unnerving. And then, out of nowhere, the hitchhiker spoke again. "Do you ever feel like you're being followed?" he asked. I turned to look at him, and he was staring straight ahead, his expression blank. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Just a feeling," he said. "Like something's always behind you, watching." I didn't like the way he said that. There was something knowing in his tone, like he was testing me. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and tried to focus on the road. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. He didn't respond. Just sat there, staring out the windshield. The lights behind us stayed there for another 20 minutes, and then, without warning, they disappeared. I checked the mirror again and again, but they were gone. Just empty road. I should have felt relieved, but I didn't. Instead, I felt more anxious than before. Because now I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been behind us was still there, just out of sight. We were about 40 minutes from Albuquerque when the hitchhiker spoke again. "You can drop me off here," he said. I looked at him, confused. "Here. We're in the middle of nowhere." "Here's fine," he said. I slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. He opened the door and stepped out, then turned to look at me. That smile was back, but this time it didn't look friendly. It looked wrong. "Thanks for the ride," he said. "But you should know, it's not me you need to worry about. It's what's been following you." Before I could say anything, he shut the door and walked off into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, my heart pounding, trying to process what he'd just said. And then I looked in the mirror. The lights were back, but this time they were closer. Much closer. I didn't wait to see what it was. I hit the gas and took off, my truck roaring down the highway. The lights stayed behind me, keeping pace no matter how fast I went. I don't know how long I drove like that. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. Eventually, I reached the outskirts of Albuquerque, and the lights disappeared again. I pulled into a truck stop, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat there in the cab, trying to calm down, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something had been following me that night, and I don't think it was human. I still drive that road sometimes, and every time I do, I can't shake the feeling that something's behind me. Just out of sight. Waiting. There's a rest stop on Interstate 80 in Nebraska, right around mile marker 89. It's one of those small, forgotten places that most people blow past without a second thought. Just a parking lot, a couple of vending machines, and a bathroom that always smells like bleach and something worse. I've stopped there a dozen times over the years. It's a good place to stretch your legs, grab a soda, and get back on the road. But after what happened last winter, I don't stop there anymore. I don't even like driving past it. It was late January, and I was hauling a load of furniture from Omaha to Cheyenne. The weather was brutal. Snow had been falling for hours, and the roads were slick with ice. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight, and I needed a break. My back was stiff, my eyes were burning, and the heater in my truck was barely keeping up with the cold. When I saw the sign for the rest stop at mile marker 89, I decided to pull in. It was around 2 in the morning, and the place was deserted. Not a single car in the parking lot. Just snow, falling in thick, heavy flakes, covering everything in a layer of white. I parked near the entrance and killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the wind howl outside. It was one of those nights where the world feels completely empty, like you're the only person left alive. I grabbed my jacket and climbed out of the cab. The cold hit me immediately, cutting through my clothes like a knife. I pulled my hood up and hurried toward the bathroom, my boots crunching in the snow. The bathroom was just as bad as I remembered. Flickering fluorescent lights, cracked tiles, and that smell. I did my business as quickly as possible and headed back outside. That's when I saw it. There was a truck parked at the far end of the lot. I don't know how I missed it before. It was an old semi, maybe from the 70s or 80s, with faded red paint and rusted chrome. The kind of truck you don't see on the road anymore. But what caught my attention wasn't the truck itself. It was the fact that the engine was running. I could see the exhaust rising from the tailpipe, a thin plume of smoke disappearing into the falling snow. I stopped in my tracks, staring at it. Something about it didn't feel right. The truck looked abandoned, like it had been sitting there for years. But the engine was running, and there was no one inside. At least I didn't think there was anyone inside. I stood there for a minute, debating whether to check it out or just get back in my truck and leave. The logical part of my brain told me it was probably just another driver who'd gone to use the bathroom. But the rest of me, the part that had spent too many nights on dark highways, told me to get out of there. I decided to compromise. I'd walk over, take a quick look, and if anything seemed off, I'd leave. Simple as that. I made my way across the parking lot, the snow crunching under my boots. As I got closer, I could see that the truck was in worse shape than I'd thought. The paint was peeling, the windows were covered in grime, and the tires looked like they hadn't been replaced in decades. But the engine was still running. I walked around to the driver's side and peered through the window. The cab was empty. No driver, no bags, no sign that anyone had been there recently. Just an empty seat and a dashboard covered in dust. I felt a chill run down my spine, and it wasn't from the cold. Something about this didn't make sense. Why would someone leave their truck running in the middle of the night, in the middle of a snowstorm, with no one around? I backed away from the truck, my instinct screaming at me to leave. But as I turned to go, I heard something, a sound, faint but distinct, coming from somewhere behind me. Footsteps. I spun around, my heart pounding. The parking lot was empty, just snow and darkness, but I could still hear them. Slow, deliberate footsteps, crunching in the snow. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely audible over the wind. No response, just the sound of footsteps, getting closer. I didn't wait to see who it was. I turned and ran back to my truck, my boots slipping on the icy pavement. I yanked open the door and climbed inside, slamming it shut behind me. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with the keys, trying to start the engine. The truck roared to life, and I threw it into gear, pulling out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was out there. But as I merged back onto the highway, I glanced in the side mirror. And that's when I saw it. The old truck was following me. It was about 100 yards back, its headlights cutting through the snow. I could see it clearly now, that faded red paint and rusted chrome. And it was keeping pace with me, matching my speed exactly. I pressed down on the gas, pushing my truck as fast as I dared on the icy roads. But no matter how fast I went, the old truck stayed right behind me, not gaining, not falling back, just there. I tried to tell myself it was just another driver, someone who happened to be going the same direction, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something wrong about that truck. Something wrong about the way it moved, the way it stayed so perfectly behind me. For the next 20 miles, it followed me. I thought about pulling over, thought about stopping and confronting whoever was driving that thing, but every time I considered it, I remembered those footsteps in the snow, the way they'd sounded so deliberate, so patient. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the truck was gone. I looked in the mirror, and there was nothing but empty highway, no headlights, no sign of the old semi, just darkness and snow. I kept driving, my heart still racing, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I didn't stop again until I reached Cheyenne, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still behind me. I've driven past that rest stop a few times since then. Every time I see that old truck parked in the lot, its engine running, its cab empty. And every time, I keep driving, because I know that if I stop, it'll follow me again. And next time, it might not let me go. I've always liked the idea of convoys. There's something comforting about driving with other truckers, especially on those long, lonely stretches of highway where you don't see another soul for hours. You're not alone out there. You've got company, even if it's just a few headlights in your mirrors or ahead of you on the road. But after what happened on Highway 50 in Nevada, I'm not so sure about convoys anymore. It was late August, and I was hauling electronics from Reno to Salt Lake City. Highway 50 is one of those roads they call the loneliest road in America. And they're not kidding. It's over 300 miles of nothing but desert, mountains, and the occasional ghost town. You can drive for an hour without seeing another car. I'd left Reno around sunset, planning to drive through the night and reach Salt Lake by morning. The weather was clear, the truck was running fine, and I had a full tank of gas. Everything was good. About an hour into the drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Another truck, maybe half a mile back. I didn't think much of it. There are plenty of truckers on Highway 50, even if you don't see them all the time. A few minutes later, I noticed another set of headlights up ahead. This one was closer, maybe a quarter mile in front of me. And then I saw a third truck, even further ahead, just barely visible in the distance. I smiled to myself. Looked like I'd accidentally joined a convoy. It's not something you plan, but it happens sometimes. A few trucks end up on the same route, going the same speed, and before you know it, you're driving together. I turned on my CB radio, figuring I'd say hello. Truckers are usually pretty friendly on the CB, especially on long hauls like this. "Hey there, convoy," I said into the mic. "This is Redline, eastbound on Highway 50. You guys got your ears on?" Static. No response. I tried again. "Redline here. Calling the convoy. Anyone out there?" More static. I frowned. Maybe they weren't listening to the same channel. I started flipping through the channels, trying to find one where someone might respond. Nothing. I set the mic down, feeling a little uneasy. It wasn't unusual for truckers to ignore the CB, especially if they were focused on the road. But something about the silence bothered me. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The truck behind me was still there, keeping the same distance. I looked ahead. The two trucks in front of me were still there too, their tail lights glowing red in the darkness. We drove like that for another 30 minutes. Same speed, same distance. It was almost eerie how perfectly spaced we were, like we were all moving in sync. And then I noticed something strange. The truck behind me wasn't getting any closer. I mean, I knew it was keeping its distance, but now that I thought about it, the distance hadn't changed at all, not even a little. It was like it was locked in place, exactly half a mile behind me. I glanced at the speedometer. I was doing 65. I eased off the gas, slowing down to 60. The truck behind me should have gotten closer, right? But it didn't. It stayed exactly where it was. My stomach tightened. I sped up again, pushing it to 70. The truck stayed in the same spot. Half a mile back. No closer. No further. I looked ahead at the 2 trucks in front of me. They were still there, maintaining the same distance. I sped up again, trying to close the gap, but no matter how fast I went, they stayed just out of reach. My hands were starting to sweat. This didn't make sense. If I was speeding up, the trucks ahead should be getting closer, and the truck behind me should be falling back. But they weren't. They were all staying in the exact same positions, like they were tied to invisible strings. I grabbed the CB mic again, my voice shaking slightly. "Red line here. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't funny. Someone talk to me." Static. I tried a different approach. "If anyone can hear me, I'm eastbound on Highway 50, about 80 miles out of Reno. I've got 3 trucks around me, and something's not right. Can anyone confirm?" More static. And then, just for a moment, I thought I heard something. A faint voice, distant and distorted, like it was coming from far away. "Following you?" I froze. "What? Say again." "They're following you." The voice cut out, replaced by static. My heart was pounding now. I looked in the mirrors again, then ahead at the road. The trucks were still there. All 3 of them, perfectly spaced, perfectly synchronized. I made a decision. I was getting off this highway. There was a small town called Eureka, about 20 miles ahead. I'd pull off there, stop for a bit, and let these trucks pass. Whatever game they were playing, I didn't want any part of it. I kept driving, my eyes glued to the road. The miles ticked by slowly, each one feeling longer than the last. The trucks stayed with me the whole time. Behind me, ahead of me, always just out of reach. Finally, I saw the sign for Eureka. I turned on my blinker and started to slow down, preparing to take the exit. But as I got closer, something happened. The trucks disappeared. I don't mean they turned off or drove away. I mean they vanished. 1 second they were there, and the next they were gone. The truck behind me, the 2 trucks ahead, all of them, just gone. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I looked around, scanning the highway in both directions. There was nothing. No trucks, no headlights, no sign that anyone had been there. I grabbed the CB mic, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone out there?" Static. And then, faint and distant, I heard it again. "They're still following you." I threw the mic down and hit the gas, pulling back onto the highway. I didn't stop in Eureka. I didn't stop at all until I reached Salt Lake City 6 hours later. To this day, I don't know what those trucks were. Maybe they were real, and I just lost track of them. Maybe they were something else. Something that didn't belong on that highway. All I know is this. Every time I drive Highway 50 now, I keep my eyes on the road and my CB turned off. Because I don't want to know if they're still out there, and I definitely don't want them following me again. Most of the time, I don't care what I'm hauling. As long as the load is secured and the weight is legal, it's all the same to me. Furniture, electronics, food, whatever. It's just cargo. I pick it up, I deliver it, and I get paid. Simple as that. But there was one load I hauled that I'll never forget, and I'll never haul anything like it again. It was early October, and I got a call from a dispatcher I'd worked with a few times before. He had a job for me, a quick run from Portland, Oregon to a small town in Northern California called Weed. The pay was good, better than usual, and the load was light. Just a few crates, he said. Easy work. I should have asked more questions, but the money was too good to pass up, so I agreed. I picked up the load from a warehouse on the outskirts of Portland. The place was old, One of those buildings that looks like it's been abandoned for years. The guy who met me there didn't say much. He just showed me the crates, helped me load them onto the truck, and handed me the paperwork. There were 3 crates in total, each about the size of a refrigerator. They were made of wood, reinforced with metal bands, and covered in markings I didn't recognize. Some kind of symbols, maybe. I didn't think too much about it at the time. "What's in these?" I asked the guy as we finished loading. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to know," he said. "Just get them to Weed, and don't open them." I nodded, even though the whole thing felt off. But like I said, the money was good. So I signed the paperwork, climbed into my truck, and hit the road. The first few hours were uneventful. I drove south through Oregon, listening to the radio and drinking coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was actually kind of peaceful. But then, as it got darker, I started to notice something. There was a smell coming from the back of the truck. Faint at first, like something musty or damp. I figured it was just the crates. Old wood can smell like that sometimes, but the longer I drove, the stronger the smell got. It wasn't just musty anymore. It was wrong. Like something rotten, but not quite. Like meat that had been left out too long. I tried to ignore it, but it kept getting worse. By the time I crossed the border into California, the smell was so strong I had to roll down the windows, even though it was freezing outside. And then I heard it. A sound coming from the back of the truck. It was faint, barely audible over the noise of the engine. But it was there. A scratching sound. Like something was moving inside one of the crates. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the crates had shifted during the drive and something inside was rubbing against the wood. That made sense, right? But the scratching didn't stop. And after a few minutes I heard something else. A low, guttural sound. Almost like a growl. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to get out and check the cargo, but another part of me remembered what the guy at the warehouse had said. Don't open them. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of the cab. The air was cold, and the smell hit me immediately. It was so strong it made my eyes water. I walked around to the back of the truck and opened the door. The crates were still there, exactly where I'd left them. But the smell was overpowering now, and I could hear the scratching more clearly. It was coming from the middle crate. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight on the crate. The wood was old and weathered, and the metal bands looked rusted. But it was the symbols that caught my attention. Up close, I could see them more clearly now. They weren't just random markings. They were deliberate, carved into the wood with precision, and they looked old, ancient even. The scratching stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then I heard it again, that low, guttural sound. But this time, it was closer, right on the other side of the wood. I backed away, my hands shaking. Whatever was in that crate, it wasn't cargo. It was alive. I should have left right then. I should have called the dispatcher, told him I wasn't delivering this load, and driven back to Portland. But I didn't. Maybe it was the money, or maybe it was just stubbornness. Either way, I closed the door, got back in the cab, and kept driving. The scratching continued for the next hour, and the smell got worse. By the time I reached the outskirts of Weed, I could barely breathe. My eyes were burning and my head was pounding. The delivery address was a warehouse on the edge of town, just as isolated as the one in Portland. I pulled up to the loading dock and killed the engine. A man was waiting for me, tall and thin, with a face that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. "You have the crates?" he asked. I nodded, too exhausted to say anything. He walked around to the back of the truck and opened the door. I heard him moving the crates, and then, after a few minutes, he came back. "Everything's here," he said. "You did good." He handed me an envelope, and I didn't bother counting the money. I just wanted to get out of there. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The man was standing in the doorway of the warehouse, watching me, and behind him, I could see the crates stacked inside. One of them was open. I didn't see what was inside, but I heard it, that low, guttural sound echoing in the night. I've hauled a lot of things since then, but I'll never haul anything like that again, because whatever was in those crates, it wasn't meant to be on the road, and it definitely wasn't meant to be delivered. I live in a small town in Montana called Billings. It's not much, just a few thousand people, a couple of gas stations and a diner that's been there since the 50s. Most people who pass through don't even notice it. They just keep driving, headed somewhere more interesting. But for me, it's home. And after what happened a few months ago, I'm starting to think that maybe I should have left a long time ago. I was coming back from a delivery in Wyoming, hauling a load of construction materials to a site just outside of Casper. It was a straightforward job, nothing unusual. I'd done it a dozen times before. The drive back to Billings was about 4 hours, and I left Casper around 10 at night. The roads were empty, as usual. Just me, my truck, and the dark Montana sky. About an hour into the drive, I noticed something in my rear-view mirror, a pair of headlights, maybe half a mile back. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Plenty of people drive this road at night. But as the miles went by, I realized the headlights weren't getting any closer, or any further. They were just staying there, half a mile back, like they were following me. I slowed down a bit, thinking maybe they'd pass me. But they slowed down too. I sped up. They sped up. No matter what I did, they stayed in the exact same spot. My stomach tightened. This felt familiar, like something I'd experienced before but couldn't quite place. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just another driver who happened to be going the same direction, but the longer it went on, the more uneasy I felt. After about 20 minutes, I decided to test it. There was a turn-off coming up, a small side road that led to a rest area. I turned on my blinker and took the exit, fully expecting the headlights to keep going. But they didn't. They followed me. My heart started racing. I pulled into the rest area and parked near the bathrooms, leaving my engine running. The headlights pulled in behind me, stopping about 100 feet away. I sat there, staring at them in the mirror. They were just sitting there, idling, not moving, not getting closer, just waiting. I reached for my phone, thinking I'd call the police. But before I could dial, the headlights turned off. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The rest area was pitch black now, except for the dim glow of the streetlights near the bathrooms. I couldn't see the vehicle anymore, couldn't tell what kind of car it was or if anyone was inside. I waited for a few minutes, my eyes glued to the mirror. Nothing moved. Everything was silent. Finally, I decided to get out of there. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway, my heart still pounding. I glanced in the mirror as I drove away, half expecting to see the headlights turn back on and follow me. But they didn't. The rest area stayed dark. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd lost them. But about 10 minutes later, the headlights were back. Same distance, same position, like they'd never left. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. This wasn't just someone going the same direction. This was deliberate. Someone was following me. I grabbed my CB radio, hoping to reach another trucker. "This is Red Line, northbound on Highway 212. I've got a vehicle following me, and I don't know what they want. If anyone's out there, please respond." Static. I tried again, my voice shaking. "This is Red Line. Someone's following me. If you can hear this, please respond." Nothing. I threw the mic down and focused on the road. I was still about 2 hours from Billings, 2 hours with this vehicle behind me. The next hour was the longest of my life. The headlights stayed with me the entire time, never getting closer, never falling back. Just there, always in my mirror. And then, as I got closer to Billings, something changed. The headlights started to get closer. Slowly at first, then faster. Within a few minutes, they were right on my tail, so close I could see the outline of the vehicle. It was a car, dark and nondescript. I couldn't make out the model or the driver. I sped up, pushing my truck as fast as it would go. But the car kept pace, staying right behind me. I could feel my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. And then, just as I reached the outskirts of Billings, the car pulled up beside me. I turned my head to look. That's when I saw it. There was no one in the driver's seat. The car was empty. I stared at it, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The car was moving, keeping pace with my truck, but there was no one behind the wheel. No one in the passenger seat. No one at all. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the car fell back and disappeared into the darkness. I didn't stop until I reached my driveway. I pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there for a long time trying to calm down. My hands were still shaking, my heart still racing. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the headlights again, but the street was empty. Since that night, I've seen the car a few more times. Always at night, always in my mirror. It doesn't follow me as closely anymore, but it's there, watching, waiting. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose me, but I know this. It's not going to stop. And one day, it's going to get closer, and I don't know what's going to happen when it does. Route 66 is one of those roads that everyone knows about, even if they've never driven it. It's iconic, historic, the kind of road you see in movies and postcards. But what people don't realize is that most of Route 66 is abandoned now. The towns are empty, the businesses are closed, and the motels are the worst. I was driving through Arizona, hauling a load of textiles to Los Angeles. It was late September, and the desert was still hot, even at night. I'd been on the road for about 12 hours, and I was exhausted. My eyes were burning, my back was stiff, and I knew I needed to stop soon or risk falling asleep at the wheel. I saw a sign for a motel about 5 miles ahead. It was one of those old Route 66 places, the kind with a neon sign and a parking lot full of cracks. The sign said, "Vacancy," which surprised me. Most of these places had been closed for years. I pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. The motel looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s. Faded paint, broken windows, and a front office that looked like it was one strong wind away from collapsing. But the vacancy sign was lit up, and I was too tired to care. I just needed a bed for a few hours. I walked into the office, and a man was sitting behind the desk. He was old, maybe in his 70s, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen too much sun. He smiled at me as I walked in, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made you uneasy. "Need a room?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just for the night." He nodded and pulled out a ledger, the old-fashioned kind with handwritten entries. He flipped through the pages, then stopped on one and looked up at me. "Room 7, he said. $20. I handed him the cash, and he gave me a key, an actual key. Not a card. The kind with a heavy metal tag attached to it. "Anything I should know?" I asked, trying to make conversation. He looked at me for a long moment, his smile fading. "Just don't go into room 10, he said. "It's not available." I frowned. "Okay, why not?" "Because it's not available," he repeated, his tone flat. I didn't push it. I just took the key and left. Room 7 was at the far end of the building next to room 8. I noticed that room 10 was at the very end, and the door was covered in chains and padlocks. I stared at it for a moment, wondering what could possibly be inside, but I was too tired to care. I unlocked room 7 and went inside. The room was exactly what I expected. Old furniture, a bed that looked like it hadn't been replaced in decades, and a bathroom with a shower that dripped constantly. But it was clean enough, and the bed was comfortable. I lay down, planning to rest for a few hours before getting back on the road. But I couldn't sleep. There was a sound coming from somewhere, a faint tapping noise. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was knocking on something. I tried to ignore it, but it kept going. Tap, tap, tap. After a few minutes, I realized the sound was coming from the wall between my room and room 8. I got up and pressed my ear to the wall, listening. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate. And then I heard something else. A voice, faint and muffled, like someone was whispering, "Help me." I backed away from the wall, my heart pounding. The voice continued, repeating the same words over and over. "Help me, help me, help me." I grabbed my jacket and left the room, heading back to the office. The old man was still there, sitting behind the desk. "There's someone in room 8, I said. I heard them asking for help. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "There's no one in room 8, he said. "I heard them," I insisted. "Someone's in there." He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Room 8 is empty," he said. "Has been for years." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Then who's in there?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, that unsettling smile creeping back onto his face. I left the office and went back to my room. The tapping had stopped, and the voice was gone. I lay back down, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it, that I was just tired, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, like someone was walking down the hallway outside my room. I sat up, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting, and then I heard it. The sound of a key sliding into a lock. My door didn't open, but I heard the same sound coming from the room next to mine. Room 8. The door creaked open, and then I heard footsteps inside. I got out of bed and pressed my ear to the wall again. The footsteps were moving around the room, slow and deliberate. And then I heard the voice again. "Help me." This time it was louder, clearer. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my things and left, not bothering to check out. I got in my truck and drove away as fast as I could. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. The old man was standing in the doorway of the office, watching me. And next to him, standing in the doorway of room 10, was a figure. Tall, thin, and completely motionless. I didn't look back again. I've driven Route 66 a few times since then, but I never stop at that motel, and whenever I pass it, I see the same thing. The vacancy sign is always lit, and the old man is always standing in the doorway, waiting for the next person to stop. I've been a trucker for almost 20 years, and in that time, I've picked up maybe a dozen hitchhikers. I know most drivers don't do it anymore, and I understand why. There are too many stories, too many risks. But sometimes, you see someone who looks like they really need help, and you can't just drive past them. This story isn't about someone I picked up, though. It's about someone who ended up in my truck without me ever stopping. It was early March, and I was driving through West Virginia, hauling a load of paper products to a warehouse in Charleston. The weather was miserable. Rain had been falling all day, and the roads were slick with water. Visibility was terrible, and I was driving slowly, trying to stay safe. I was about 2 hours outside of Charleston when I noticed something strange. There was a smell in the cab. Not a bad smell exactly, but something musty, like wet clothes or damp fabric. I figured maybe I'd tracked in some water on my boots, so I didn't think much of it. But then I felt it. A presence. Like someone was sitting in the passenger seat next to me. I glanced over and my heart nearly stopped. There was someone there. A woman sitting in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes dripping water onto the seat. I slammed on the brakes, my truck skidding to a stop on the side of the road. I stared at her, my mind racing, trying to figure out how she'd gotten there. I hadn't stopped. I hadn't picked anyone up. My doors had been locked the entire time. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, her expression blank. "How did you get in here?" I demanded. Still no response. She didn't move, didn't blink. It was like she wasn't even alive. I reached for my phone, thinking I'd call the police. But before I could dial, she turned her head and looked at me. Her eyes were empty, like there was nothing behind them. And then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't stop." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What?" "You didn't stop," she repeated. "You just kept driving." I didn't know what she was talking about. I hadn't seen anyone on the side of the road. I hadn't passed any hitchhikers. "I don't understand," I said. "I didn't see you." She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was sad, hollow. "You didn't see me," she said, "but I was there, and now I'm here." Before I could say anything else, she vanished. 1 second she was there, and the next, she was gone. The seat was dry, like she'd never been there at all. I sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I'd just seen. A hallucination, a ghost. I didn't have an answer. Eventually, I started driving again, my mind still reeling. I tried to convince myself that it had been my imagination, that I'd been driving too long and my brain was playing tricks on me. But then, about 20 minutes later, I saw her again. This time, she was standing on the side of the road exactly where I'd passed about an hour earlier. She was soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face, her hand outstretched like she was trying to flag someone down. I slowed down, my breath catching in my throat. And as I got closer, she turned and looked at me. That same empty expression, that same hollow smile. And then she was gone, just vanished like she'd never been there. I didn't stop. I kept driving, my hands shaking, my mind racing. When I finally reached Charleston, I went straight to the warehouse, unloaded my cargo, and got the hell out of West Virginia. I've driven through that area a few times since then, and every time I see her, standing on the side of the road, soaking wet, her hand outstretched, waiting for someone to stop. But I never do, because I know what happens if you do. She gets in your truck, and she never leaves. There's a truck stop I used to go to in Oklahoma, just off Interstate 40. It was one of those big ones with a restaurant, showers, a store, and a repair shop. I'd stop there all the time when I was running routes through the state. Good food, clean bathrooms, and the staff was always friendly. But about a year ago, something happened that made me question whether that place was ever real. I was driving through Oklahoma on my way to Amarillo, hauling a load of appliances. It was around midnight, and I was getting tired. I decided to stop at the truck stop, grab some coffee, and maybe take a quick nap before finishing the drive. I pulled off the interstate and headed down the exit ramp. But as I got closer to where the truck stop should have been, I realized something was wrong. The lights were off. The parking lot was empty, and the building looked different. It was still there, but it didn't look like a truck stop anymore. It looked abandoned. The windows were boarded up, the sign was gone, and the parking lot was overgrown with weeds. I stopped my truck and got out, staring at the building in disbelief. This didn't make sense. I'd been here just a few weeks ago, and everything had been fine. How could it have changed so quickly? I walked up to the front entrance. The doors were chained shut, and there was a sign hanging on them. It was old and faded, but I could just make out the words, "Closed since 1987. My blood ran cold. 1987? That couldn't be right. I'd been here weeks ago. I'd eaten in the restaurant. I'd talked to the staff. I backed away from the building, my mind racing. And then I heard it, a sound coming from inside, faint but distinct, like someone was moving around in there. I should have left right then, but something made me stay. I walked around to the side of the building, looking for another entrance. And that's when I saw it. One of the windows wasn't boarded up. It was open, just a crack, like someone had pried it open recently. I peered through the window, shining my flashlight inside. The interior was a mess. Tables were overturned. The floor was covered in debris, and there were old posters on the walls, yellowed with age. But in the far corner of the room, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A figure, standing in the shadows. Just standing there, completely still. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding, and then I heard it again. That sound coming from inside, but this time it was closer, like whatever was in there was moving toward the window. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran back to my truck, climbed in, and drove away as fast as I could. I've tried to find that truck stop again. I've driven past that exit dozens of times, but it's never there. Sometimes the exit is there, but the truck stop isn't. Sometimes the exit isn't there at all. I don't know what I saw that night, but I know this. That truck stop didn't exist, at least not anymore. And whatever was inside, I don't think it was human. Most truckers keep their CB radios on, even if they're not actively using them. It's nice to have the chatter in the background, keeps you company on those long drives. You hear other drivers talking about traffic, weather, good places to stop. It's comforting, in a way. But sometimes you hear things that aren't comforting at all. I was driving through New Mexico, heading east on Interstate 40. It was around 3 in the morning, and the roads were empty. I had my CB on, tuned to channel 19, which is the standard channel for truckers. For the first hour, it was just static. No one was talking. That's not unusual for that time of night. Most drivers are either sleeping or too focused on the road to chat. But then I heard a voice. It was faint at first, barely audible over the static. A man's voice, low and rough. "Anyone out there?" I picked up the mic. "Yeah, I'm here. This is Redline. Eastbound on I-40. What's your 20? No response. Just static. I waited for a moment, then tried again. "Redline here. You got your ears on?" The voice came back, clearer this time. "I need help." My stomach tightened. "What's wrong? Where are you?" "I don't know," the voice said. "I've been driving for hours. I can't find the way out." "The way out of what?" I asked. "The road," he said. "I can't get off the road." I frowned. That didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" "Just take the next exit." "There are no exits," he said, his voice rising. "I've been driving for hours, and there are no exits, just road, just darkness." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What's your location? What mile marker are you at?" "I don't know," he said. "I can't see any signs. There's nothing out here, just road." I glanced out the window. The highway stretched ahead of me, dark and empty. I could see the mile markers as I passed them, clear as day. How could he not see them? "Listen," I said, trying to stay calm. "Just pull over. Stop your truck and figure out where you are." "I can't stop," he said, his voice shaking now. "Every time I try to stop, something happens." "What happens?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, and then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "It gets closer." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What gets closer?" "I don't know," he said. "I can't see it, but I can feel it. It's behind me. It's always behind me." I looked in my rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty, nothing but darkness. "There's nothing behind you," I said. "You're just tired. Pull over and get some rest." "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "It's not going to stop. It's never going to stop." And then the radio went dead. Just static. I tried calling out again, tried to get him back on the line. But there was nothing. Just silence. I kept driving, my heart pounding, my eyes glued to the road. And then, about 10 minutes later, I saw something. A truck pulled over on the side of the road. Its hazard lights were flashing and the driver's door was open. I slowed down, pulling over behind it. I grabbed my flashlight and got out, walking up to the truck. The cab was empty. No driver, no sign of anyone. But the radio was still on, and as I got closer, I could hear it. Static. And then, faint and distant, a voice. It got me. I backed away from the truck, my heart racing. And then I ran back to my own truck, climbed in, and drove away. I never found out who that driver was, and I never heard his voice on the CB again. But sometimes, late at night, when the roads are empty and the radio is quiet, I hear it, just for a moment. That same voice, calling out into the darkness. It got me. I've driven through a lot of small towns over the years, and I've stopped at a lot of gas stations. Most of them blend together after a while. Same layout, same snacks, same tired cashier behind the counter. But there's one gas station I'll never forget, and I'll never go back to it. It was late November, and I was driving through North Dakota, hauling a load of grain to a facility just outside of Fargo. The weather was brutal. Snow had been falling for hours, and the roads were nearly impossible to see. I'd been driving for about 6 hours straight, and I was running low on fuel. I saw a sign for a gas station about 10 miles ahead. I didn't recognize the name, but I didn't care. I just needed to fill up and get back on the road. When I pulled into the station, I realized just how isolated it was. There were no other buildings around, no houses, no lights, just the gas station, sitting in the middle of a snow-covered field. The place looked old. The pumps were ancient, the kind you don't see anymore, and the building itself looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. But the lights were on, and the open sign was lit up. I parked at one of the pumps and climbed out of the cab. The cold hit me immediately, cutting through my jacket like a knife. I hurried to the pump and started filling up my tank. As I stood there, shivering in the cold, I noticed something strange. There were no other vehicles in the lot. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just mine. And then I noticed something else. The snow around the gas station was completely undisturbed. There were no tire tracks, no footprints, just smooth, untouched snow. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. How was that possible? Someone had to be working here. Someone had turned on the lights. I finished filling up and walked into the building. A bell chimed as I opened the door and I stepped inside. The interior was just as old as the exterior. Faded linoleum floors, dusty shelves, and fluorescent lights that flickered constantly. But what caught my attention was the cashier. He was sitting behind the counter, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me at all, just sat there, completely still. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to the counter. "I need to pay for the gas." He didn't respond, didn't move. I waved my hand in front of his face. "Hey, you okay?" Nothing. I took a step back, my heart starting to race. Something was very wrong here. I looked around the store, searching for any sign of life. But there was nothing, just empty aisles and that flickering light. And then I heard it. A sound, coming from somewhere in the back of the store. A low, rhythmic thumping, like something was hitting the floor. I backed toward the door, my eyes locked on the hallway that led to the back room. The thumping got louder, closer, and then I saw it. A figure, emerging from the darkness of the hallway. It was tall, impossibly tall, with long limbs that seemed to bend at unnatural angles. Its face was obscured, hidden in shadow, but I could feel it looking at me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran, bursting through the door and sprinting back to my truck. I climbed in, started the engine, and floored it, tearing out of the parking lot as fast as I could. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was following me. When I reached Fargo a few hours later, I checked my fuel gauge. It was still on empty. The gas I'd pumped, it was like it had never happened. I've driven through North Dakota a few times since then, but I've never found that gas station again. I've looked for it, tried to retrace my route, but it's not there. Like it never existed. And I'm starting to think maybe it didn't. I've always trusted my mirrors. When you're driving a truck, your mirrors are your lifeline. You use them to check your blind spots, to see what's coming up behind you, to make sure your load is secure. You trust them completely. But after what happened in Idaho, I don't trust my mirrors anymore. I was driving through the southern part of the state, hauling a load of lumber to a construction site in Boise. It was early December, and the roads were icy. I was taking it slow, being careful not to slide off into the ditch. About halfway through the drive, I noticed something strange in my side mirror. The road behind me didn't look right. It was the same highway I was on, but something about it was off. The landscape was different. The trees were thicker, darker, and the sky was a shade of gray I'd never seen before. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, it was still there. That wrong road reflected in my mirror. I adjusted the mirror, thinking maybe it was just the angle. But the image didn't change. The road behind me was different from the road I was actually on. I glanced at my other mirror. Same thing. The road was wrong. My heart started to race. I looked over my shoulder, trying to see the actual road behind me. But when I looked back, everything was normal. The highway, the trees, the sky, everything looked exactly as it should. But in the mirrors, it was different. In the mirrors, I was somewhere else. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the road ahead. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time I glanced at the mirrors, I saw that other road. That wrong road. And then I noticed something else. In the mirror, there was a truck behind me. It was about a quarter-mile back, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I looked over my shoulder again. The road behind me was empty. No trucks, no cars, nothing. But in the mirror, the truck was there, and it was getting closer. I pressed down on the gas, trying to put some distance between me and whatever was in the mirror. But no matter how fast I went, the truck stayed right behind me, closing the gap. And then, suddenly, it was gone. I looked in the mirror, and the road was empty. No truck, no headlights, just that wrong road stretching out behind me. I pulled over to the side of the highway, my hands shaking. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Eventually, I got back on the road, but for the rest of the drive, I didn't look at my mirrors. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, refusing to glance back. When I finally reached Boise, I had the mirrors checked at a repair shop. The mechanic said they were fine. No cracks, no warping, nothing that would cause them to show the wrong image. But I know what I saw. And I know that whatever was in those mirrors, it wasn't the road I was on. Since that night, I've replaced my mirrors 3 times. But it doesn't matter, because every now and then, when I'm driving late at night, I see it again. That wrong road reflected in my mirrors, and sometimes I see that truck getting closer and closer. One day, I'm afraid it's going to catch up to me, and when it does, I don't think I'll be on the right road anymore. I'll be on the other one, the one in the mirror, and I don't think there's any way back.